Kinda sound radio. We're tuning in the change.
Hello, hello. This is Chinn and the radio show Meditation for Misfits. And for the very first time, I am doing a live show. It feels really surreal to be here. And this is a really special show. And actually, it's a big deal for me to do this. I'm going to be talking about something that makes me feel quite vulnerable. And I also think it's really important to have the conversation and to explore the themes that I'm going to explore today. I know I've got some people listening live, so thank you for taking time out of the middle of your day, in the middle of the week, to come along and to be here. As the show is live, and I made a conscious decision to make it live so it can be as interactive as possible. If there's anything that you want to comment or suggest or feedback on, please reach out to us. We've got the Kind of Sound Instagram, so it's at Kind of Sound, and also we've got a Telegram group, t.me/KS Radio. And I know that I've got friends listening as well, and if you want to reach out personally to me when the songs are on, I'll try and have a look at my phone and see if anyone's got anything that they want me to share on the show. So thank you for being here. What are we talking about today? Well, we are talking about, I am talking about, more specifically, growing up under Section 28. Now, before we go any further, usually I have, or most of my shows have been with guests, and today I'm speaking myself, and usually when the person comes on, I get them to do 3 breaths. So what we're going to do before we go any further is, before I even talk about Section 28 and what it is, just to start the show and to open the show, I'll invite you to take 3 breaths with me. I certainly need them today. My heart is beating hard. I wouldn't expect anything less based on what I'm going to share today. So I'm going to invite you to put your hands on your chest, in the center of your chest, nice and gentle, and feel that connection. And if it feels comfortable, close your eyes. And let's take 3 lovely, slow, deep breaths. Breathing in deep, filling yourself up, and breathing out slow. And let's do that a couple more times at your own pace. And one more. There we have it. The power of the breath. I feel calmer and more grounded and more balanced, and I hope you do too. So, what is Section 28, or what was it? Section 28 was a UK-wide law that came into force in 1988. So that's actually when I was 5, so I was just starting school. I didn't know this was happening. I need to make this clear, and it's not until recently that I've really started to unravel and understand the impact of this law, and I hope to unpack that with you today. So this law prohibited the promotion of homosexuality in local authorities. So how that impacted most people was in schools. Of course, it was introduced by Margaret Thatcher, who else? And the Conservative government. And it was in place until the year 2000, until I was 17. So the whole 12 years of my school career, primary school and high school, this law was in place. And for context, it was in place 3 years longer even in the rest of the UK. So I was 5 when the law came in, and I was 17 when it was repealed. And this law was a really damaging law, and this law caused a lot of upset and pain and suffering, I would say, for a lot of people. And I think it's really important to bring awareness to this because what I've noticed, and when I've been marketing this show, a lot of people who are my peers and who are British even didn't have any idea that this was going on, regardless of their sexuality, sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. And it's something I would say is still impacting us now. It's certainly still impacting me now, hence why I want to unpack it. So my intention today is to bring awareness to this, and to do it with lots of compassion and heart, first and foremost towards myself. It's been a really interesting experience to get to this point today to do this. It is stepping out of my comfort zone, and I think it's also really important to speak up. It's really important to speak up and to talk about this and use this platform, because I know I'm strong enough to do it. And I know that there's lots of other people whose story may resonate with my story and vice versa, and they need to hear what I'm going to say today. People of all ages, you know. So the intention for you today, the invitation, is to listen with curiosity and compassion. I'm sure we're all going to learn stuff today, and I would love to inspire you and challenge you and make you think in a compassionate and loving way today. And before I go any further, I wanted to bring in a quote by a wonderful English comedian called Bridget Christie. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's fab. And I've got a quote of hers that I've had written down for ages, and it finally makes sense to bring it in today. And the quote is, "You'll never find your audience until you say what you're too scared to say." And it actually makes me feel a bit emotional saying that, because observing myself in preparing for this show has been fascinating, and I've had to do that with a lot of compassion, and thankfully a lot of support from lots of wonderful people telling me that I'm amazing, that I can do this, that I need to do this, that it's important. Because even when, a little anecdote, even when I made the flyer for this show and I sent it over to Django, there was like a small part of me that's like, this flyer's too much, it's too loud, it's too gay, it's too much, you know, like it's that's the expression, that's the phrase that came to me. And I thought, isn't that fascinating? You know, there's still a part of me that's like holding back or self-censoring. And it made me even more motivated and resolute to come and to do this show, you know. So there's something, I've done a lot of research for this show. I don't know if I'm going to manage to get to everything that I have researched, noted down, but I'm going to do my best. And I've also got some amazing music for you that is very rousing and kind of weaves into the story that I hope to tell you today. Now, in my research, I came across a couple of paragraphs that I think just help set a bit of context, a bit of a wider context, let's say, of this conversation. So I'm just going to read it out for you. Mental health problems such as depression, self-harm, alcohol and drug abuse, and suicidal thoughts can affect anyone, but they're more common among people who are LGBTQI+. Being LGBTQI+ doesn't cause these problems, but some things LGBTQI+ people go through can affect their mental health, such as discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, social isolation, rejection, and difficult experiences of coming out. So in the context of Section 28 and the education system that I was in, part of, like I said earlier, it's only recently that I've started to realise the immense damage of this law on myself and other people. No wonder that I had no role models, because this law was creating a culture of silence and of self-censorship. And there's a phrase that I love, which is, you can't be who you can't see. You just can't. So no wonder it took me so long to feel okay with realizing that I was attracted to girls, to women. And there were so many years of denial, of shame, of trying to run away from myself. And I realize now, you know, the expression would be, it's internalized homophobia, right? And me as a queer woman having an internalized homophobia, I think, well, we've all probably got it a bit. And I think it's really important for me to own that and to admit to it and go, it's okay, I didn't create that, that's a product of the environment that I was in. There's a quote from Margaret Thatcher at the time, that I need to read to you. And when I read this quote a few days ago, I just wept. I just wept. She said about Section 28, children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. And I can feel the tears in my eyes, just that expression, they have an inalienable right to be gay. It just upsets and angers me so much and makes me want to punch a wall. It really does. I'm just going to take a breath after that. So this law was in place for many years. There were LGBT campaigners that pushed back against it, but basically what it created was loads of fear. And also it was really vaguely worded and almost impossible to enforce. But what really opened my eyes to this whole situation was a podcast I listened to this March. The best podcast, I can recommend it. It's so amazing. It's called The Guilty Feminist. And it's a podcast that mixes feminism, activism, and comedy. And they interviewed the director and one of the actors and the person that this film was based on. It's a film called Blue Jean, and it's the film about a PE teacher who was a teacher during the time of Section 28. And I actually watched this film on Monday, kind of as research for this show. And it was just so eye-opening. Like, no wonder I myself, being young at the time and trying to work out my sexuality, felt so much fear and shame when the teachers who were gay, who were queer, who were lesbian, were so terrified that someone was going to find out about their sexuality that they'd lose their job. No one ever did, but it's just the fear was there. It was palpable, you know? So I can highly recommend this film, Blue Jean. I can highly recommend it. Now, before we go into the first song, I just want to give you context of the struggles and the process that I went through at that time, not knowing that this context I was in was really homophobic, no? And I'll give you some examples, and then we're going to go into a song which I think is very relevant and apt. Just little things looking back, the homophobia that was around us and that we were also partaking in. When I was at primary school, there was a teacher called Mr. Gillespie. He wasn't a particularly nice teacher, actually, but behind his back, we called him Mr. Gay Lezzy, and we laughed about it. You know, there's this ridicule, you know, this making fun of. When I was at high school, no one was gay, and it was a big high school, 1,500 people for a small town. And my reference, the two lesbians in my school were two girls who were very masculine presenting, who had short hair, and who I was terrified of. They were 3 or 4 years older than me, but I was terrified of them. I mean, and now I realize why, because it woke up something in me that I was deeply uncomfortable with at the time. But those were the people that were in my world, you know, there was no one else. So no surprise that at school I started to just bury myself in my studies, because that was my safe zone, my comfort zone. I knew what I was doing. And I think was scared to investigate who I was, actually, looking back. So I did good at school until the point where I got to my final exams. And I just had this breakdown because I was trying to do everything and I couldn't. And actually, I think that was the start of this true essence of a person that you're hearing today, trying to fight out and trying to break free of this like little box I'd put unknowingly, unwittingly put her in. So that's when a cycle of really bad mental health, you know, like low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, insomnia, like I was just on loads of different drugs and completely disconnected from my emotions. And that went on for about three years really badly. So any sort of exploration of sexuality or whatever was off the cards, because I was just trying to survive every day. And then fast forward to being in my second year at uni, and I was called out for being homophobic. I was called out by a friend of a friend who was a lesbian, and I remember being out one night. So yes, we were a bit drunk, and she was like, "You blank me and you're rude to me, and that's homophobic." And I just felt awful. And I remember, and honestly, I just remembered this morning. I went out for a walk in the forest to prepare for today, get a bit of tree wisdom. And I was like, God, that night I was inconsolable in a toilet for like half an hour. I don't know how long it was. It was an eternity. And again, there was just all these emotions in me that I couldn't understand, that I didn't have words for. And it actually took me, cutting a long story short, to travel to the other side of the world when I was 23 to start accepting that I liked women and I was going to explore it. It took me to get to the other side of the world to free myself of these shackles of social conditioning. And there's quite a lot more to that story, and it's got lots of twists and turns, but that is how long it took me to even start exploring my sexuality. Feeling okay with it took forever. It was way more years, you know. And still, I was just thinking, as well as preparing for this show, in my early 30s, so I was now in Barcelona, I'm working as an English teacher. Like, I was still hiding my sexuality from my students. If they asked me if I had a boyfriend, I said no. My policy was always, I won't lie. So it wasn't lying, I didn't have a boyfriend. But it took me until my early 30s to mention to a class of 12 or 13-year-olds that I didn't have a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend. And they just were like, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, oh, for goodness sake, Alice. Would you just like get over yourself? But it's fine, you know, like I'm not surprised I had all this shame and resistance inside myself. You know, I know a lot of other people do, and that's why I think it's really important to talk about this. So I'm going to stop now, and we're going to go into the first song that I have for you today. I've brought rousing music today. There would be no other way to do this show. And this is a song that came out fascinatingly in the year 2000, which is the year that this terrible law was finally repealed. It's a song by Heather Small, and it's called Proud. And the reason I've chosen this song is because there's apart from the bit where it says, what have you done today to make yourself feel proud? Well, my answer is I've done this show, I'm doing it. There's another expression that I think is almost stronger, which is, or more powerful, which is to question is to grow. To question is to grow. And I'd like to reflect on that afterwards. So Django, if you would like to put on, please, Proud by Heather Small. And let's have a dance around. This song is fabulous.
Kinda Sound Radio, the station for a global community.
We're back. Welcome back to part 2 of Meditation for Misfits with your host, Alice Chinn. And today we are talking about my experiences of growing up under Section 28. I hope you enjoyed that song. For me, it's just a song of its time. It reminds me of, you know, being in my late teens. It's a song that's come back to me in the last 2 or 3 years, and just with the perspective that I have now and the wisdom I have now, those words, aren't they so powerful? And it reminds me that for me, meditation is a form of activism. Meditation invites awareness, and when we have awareness, we're invited to question. And as Heather Small says, to question is to grow. And actually, I'm also delighted to say that I've had a couple of comments from friends. I just want to read, I want to say, Tara, thank you so much for writing in. Tara's someone else who's also trained on the Connected Kids course. So she's also a fellow kids and teens meditation teacher. And she's listening into the show, and she said, so Tara's a little older than me. She says that she was a young teacher and she started in 95. She had gay friends. And she used to challenge kids who used gay as an insult. And she remembers also being relieved when Section 28 was repealed, as she then felt she could challenge without threat. That threat might not have been there, but it felt real to her. Okay, so that's so fascinating to get someone else's perspective, no? And I think it is so important to look back at the past and see how it's impacted us both then and now, no? So what are we going to talk about in this second section? I want to go in a little bit deeper into the LGBTQI plus collective and queerness now, no, in modern, I was going to say modern Britain, but why am I saying that? That's so limiting. This is a show that's going out worldwide. I'm not going to limit myself to modern Britain, modern society. You know, and I've got a few stats here, and you know, I've got some things I'm going to share, and I'm also really aware, and I think it's really important to say that I'm not an expert on, yes, I'm a member of the LGBTQ collective, but things are changing. You know, I'm 40, maybe there's some younger folk listening to this, or it doesn't matter your age, but to give an example, no, like there's more terminology around these days. So maybe I am not gonna get everything right or up to date, or maybe I say something that you think is not factually correct, or that you want to comment on. So if you think I've got something wrong, like, I'm really open to learning and I'm really open to having a conversation about this. So do reach out. Do reach out. Now, first of all, in terms of all the letters we have these days, all the letters, I've got a friend, Philippa, who's in her 70s, and the other day she just said, just Alice, can you just remind me again, please, of what all these letters are? She's like, it's LG, what? I mean, and we had to giggle about it, you know? And I can hear those voices that are like, oh, God, is there really so much need? Is there so much need for all these ways of defining ourselves? And my answer is, I believe, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to talk about my personal experience. You may have a different opinion. But for me, in terms of like sexual orientation, for example, we have different words to define how we feel. And for me, it's important how I define for me and for no one else, no? And it also is important to be able to give context and to be able to make sense of the world, right? So I have these definitions first and foremost for me, and then to be able to understand other people too, right? So I think it's really interesting to talk about how I identify, because I think it's fascinating how that has evolved over the years and how it still is, actually. And again, it's that thing of meditation being a form of activism, that awareness to go, wait, like, does this sit well with me or not? Is this aligned with me or not? So when I first came out, I actually came out as bisexual because I couldn't face the possibility of being a lesbian, which was a process. And then for years, this is when I lived in Scotland, I talked about being gay. And now looking back, I understand why I felt more comfortable saying gay than lesbian. And that's because gay is actually the word that we use for men, isn't it? And then we've extrapolated that and made it general. So lesbian it created more shame inside my body, and it felt too much. Again, it's that expression that I used at the start of the show. It felt too much, so I skirted around it. I didn't use it. Maybe in a jokey context with friends, but I would say I'm gay. And then I moved to Barcelona in 2012, and gay is the word that's used for men here. You don't say that for women. So then I was faced with having to use this word lesbian, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling all this resistance. And then just at this time, suddenly everyone was queer, and all the young folk were queer. And now queer is a really interesting one, because I actually choose to use that word now. I would actually now say queer and lesbian, and I would use both or one or the other, depending on how I'm feeling that day and who I'm talking to. And queer is, for me, a really important word as part of these letters that are the LGBTQI plus collective, right? Because queer is political. Queer is, I am positioning, in the way I define it, is I am positioning myself outside of heteronormativity. So this word heteronormative, right? It's like the society we live in is largely heteronormative. So an example of this would be that when two people are getting married, it's usually a man and a woman. We have heteronormative assumptions. So for example, I walk through the world and people look at me, and if I have a partner, they might assume that that partner was a man. No, these are heteronormative assumptions. So when you say I'm queer, or I have, a queer family, we know that that family is, or that person is not heteronormative and not ascribing to those values or those ways of being. So for me, it's really important to have that vocabulary and to have that word. And it goes deeper than that, because queer also, it's like an umbrella term that also encapsulates gender as well. And I'm not going to touch so much on gender today, because I don't think there's time, and I don't want to put too much into this show, but it's something it's definitely touched on in this show, indirectly, and it's something that's really important to talk about as well. Our gender expression, gender identity, there's a lot there. So about 3 years ago, an older lesbian challenged me on this queer thing, because I was using the word queer all the time. It's like I'd sidestepped lesbian. Conveniently. And she just turned around to me and she said, why are all you young lesbians using this word queer? She's like, we had to fight for that word, a word for us, for ourselves. Why are you using this word queer? Why can't you embrace this word lesbian? And I felt a bit like defensive at the time, and I started trying to defend myself and justify myself. But I'm really grateful to that woman, because she made me realize that I do need to, there was still a bit of shame attached to the word lesbian. There was, for me anyway. And so I use it now. And I also use the word queer, like I say, and sometimes I want to use the word gay, and I'll keep changing that, and that's okay. And also something else as well is like, isn't it wonderful that there's all these different options, right? And sometimes I've even thought that the word lesbian limited me a little bit, because I don't always fancy people that are women. Sometimes I fancy other genders. So like, I feel very liberated and to have these words. Like, it feels like a privilege to be able to have them and to be able to use them freely, And I actually want to talk as well in the wider context of shifts that are happening in society. And this is something I want to say thank you to my wonderful friend Lauren Bianchi, who posted this on her Instagram. There's an account by a guy called a queer person, called Matt Bernstein. So it's at Matt with 2 T's, XIV. And the post that Matt put on their Instagram is just like, it just illustrates for me so clearly shifts in society in the context of LGBTQ-ness. And it's in the context of the history of left-handedness, okay? So these are general stats, and if you've got more up-to-date stats, please reach out. But the stats that I've got are, these days, 1 in 5 adult members of Gen Z self-identify as LGBTQ. So Gen Z are the generation that are after me, essentially. I'm a millennial, and it's folk that were born in the late 90s and early 2000s, okay? That's quite a lot, 1 in 5, no? And in general, these are general stats, roughly 1 in 10 people, so people of all ages, identify as LGBTQ. So it's like, suddenly being LGBTQ seems more popular, right? And what Matt was highlighting, because like, this is what you sometimes hear, no? Like, how come like so many kids are suddenly LGBTQ? Like, or is it just it's fashionable, everyone wants to be queer? And Matt's point was, yeah, but people will be themselves when you stop punishing them for it. And let's think about this in the context of Section 28. No, I can feel my heart beating just like thinking about this. So what am I talking about with the story of left-handedness? Well, In the early 1900s, left-handedness was thought of as inferior, perverted, and satanic. So lefty kids were beaten by nuns and forced to write with their right hand at school. But when left-handed stigma faded, folk identifying as left-handed skyrocketed, unsurprisingly, because there wasn't this fear anymore. So it went from 3% to 12%, not suddenly because it was trendy or because teachers were pushing it on them. And we can say the same about kids being queer. And I'm going to use this word queer as a generic because it's easier as well than saying LGBTQ. So kids are queer. They're not being queer because it's woke, no? Like kids aren't suddenly gay because a drag queen read them like a storybook. Like kids aren't trans because someone's put the idea in their head, no? It's because, thankfully, at least in the Western world, people are being punished for it less. We don't have Section 28 anymore. You know, and let's flip this for a moment and think, oh my goodness, how terrible must it have been for the queer people that were our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, and they had to live in the closet. Like, I just can't imagine how horrible that must have been, you know? And that's my alarm telling me that I need to, hold on, here we go, telling me that I need to stop talking and start getting another song on. Just to close that, I want to give this just a reminder as well that, and again, I hope these are up to date, 68 countries in the world still criminalize homosexuality. 68 countries. There's still a lot of work to do, hence why I'm here today doing this show. So I'm going to bring a song for you now, which I assume a lot of most of the listeners won't have heard, because she's not like a dead famous person, but it's a song that just is packed full of the most wonderful lyrics. Now, I heard of Grace Petrie, this is the singer, on The Guilty Feminist. She's a regular singer on the show. And she's a UK folk singer-songwriter and an activist. And we're going to play, for me, her like absolute best song. It's called Black Tie. Grace identifies as a butch lesbian, and she's got quite a let's say, androgynous way of dressing. And I was researching how she described this song, and she said, black tie is like shrugging off whatever expectations society has of you to wear or look or be anything at all. And there is a little bit of swearing in this song in case you've got young people listening. And you must listen out for the wonderful expression or phrase in the song, which is, and the images that fucked ya were a patriarchal structure. You have to say it with an English accent, otherwise it doesn't really work. And there's another phrase which I love, which is, you will never surrender to a narrow view of gender. So Django, please, if you could pop on Black Tie by Grace Petrie, and please take a moment to sit back and just consciously listen to these words, because there's so much richness in there that it just blows my mind. Here's Black Tie by Grace Petrie.
Kind of sound, tuning in for change.
Welcome back, lovely listeners, to the third part of this first live show of Meditation for Misfits with your host, Alice Chinn. And we have just been listening to Black Tie by the wonderful Grace Petrie. I find that song so inspiring and so rousing, and so it just fills me with so many different emotions. Like, I feel seen. And I hope if you're listening to that song, and I don't know, like, I just really hope that the words have resonated, that you have learned something, that it's moved you in some way, you know, because isn't it wonderful, the power of music to move us? And something that I love about doing these shows on this platform is the opportunity in the shows that air live. I'm pre-recorded, but the ones that go on the Kind of Sound website, that we can have music. Like, it's just a lovely way to weave a story through a show. So I'm feeling very grateful for that and for the music. I want to close off this show bringing everything together and talking in general terms about my experience as a lesbian and as a queer woman, now 40 years old, working and empowering people of all ages who don't fit in with mindful superpowers, with meditation and mindfulness. No, why is my experience growing up under Section 28 and my specific struggles, like, how does that inform the work I do? And I'm also going to share just some other general things that I've learned based on the experience that I've had and the struggles I've had, specifically focused on my sexual orientation and LGBTQ-ness. So for me, being queer, being not heteronormative, like, it so informs the work I do. You can when you are part of a marginalized group, and I still understand the privilege I have. I am fully aware of the privilege I have. I am white, I'm European, I'm middle class, living in the Western world. I'm still part of a marginalized group, and it just, when you're forced to break free of heteronormativity, in my case, then there's an invitation there, and it's not easy and it's not comfortable, but there's an invitation there to kind of question everything and to really, like, there's an invitation and an opportunity to really embrace your authenticity. And you probably will have understood a little more by listening to me today that my specific struggles, went on for many years, and I still have my moments. And then, of course, I can use all of that experience in the work I do for people of all walks of life, because you can build up then, when you've had those experiences, an immense ability to be empathetic and to really want to champion people to step into their light and their truth and their authenticity. And all these experiences that I've had and the things I've talked about today feed into that, like 100%. And I'm so grateful to have lived when I lived and to have experienced what I experienced, so that I can use that in the work that I do, and so that I can be inclusive, because you're so challenged when you start questioning all this stuff, and you are asked, if you want to be yourself and embrace who you are, then there's a need to step away from anything that's normal, right? Because that's not you. Like, normal, unfortunately, and I have to say, for context, I really don't like this word normal, because it implies that anything that's not normal is abnormal, right? So let's say that if heteronormativity is normal, when you step outside of that, then you are embracing a different way of being. And I see the positive in that now, and I want to be able to empower other people to be able to really celebrate and accept who they are, whatever that is, and especially those who feel they don't fit in, because that's my experience, right? Something else I've learned as well from being queer and being a lesbian is that in general, to never assume anything and to question everything. Not so much now, but many times over the years, when people have asked me if I have a boyfriend, I just think, oh, for goodness sake. And at the time, I didn't have the nerve to say the response that I would say today, which is, please, could you ask me that question again without assuming the gender of my partner? And I think that says a lot, no? And I do it too. I can sometimes look at someone and think that person is definitely a lesbian, turns out they're not, and vice versa. No, we have these assumptions inside of us. So the invitation is to check ourselves, no? And to, if someone talks about their partner, if it's a person who is a woman that's telling you about their partner, perhaps don't ask the question afterwards, all right, where is he from? Doesn't take much to change your language and go, oh, so where are they from? We've got this wonderful opportunity in the English language with they and them, which is neutral, right? So if we don't know the gender of someone, this is just a simple example, then yeah, we can choose to use inclusive language, partner instead of girlfriend or boyfriend, for example, so that we are not upsetting people, actually. And we are also, if we're not sure, we can always ask, people don't mind that at all. What else do I want to say? I'm talking about inclusive language, yes. And I've got another phrase for you, and I don't know where I got this from. I think I probably heard it. I'm probably sure I heard it on the Guilty Feminist podcast. And it just resonates so much. And if anyone knows where this has come from, please let me know, because I don't know who said it originally. Love someone more than you don't understand them. I'm going to say that again. I think it's so powerful. Love someone more than you don't understand them. And I'm going to give you an example here. When I was literally, I said earlier, I was on the other side of the world when I came out. That's true. I was actually in New Zealand. And I emailed my sisters. I phoned my parents. That was very brave. But I knew they were going to support me. And I knew my family was going to be supportive. The best example from that whole time was my sister Grace, who I emailed. My two sisters, I've got two younger sisters. So I was 23 at the time. So she was 20, 21. And her response was just gold. She said, I've processed this. Like you've told me that you like a different type of pizza to me. And that was it. And that was it. And she might not like the type of pizza I like. She might not even understand it. But she's still going to love me for liking the type of pizza I like. And I will take a moment to say I am so, I'm in a fortunate position to have family and friends at the time when I was struggling with all of that, who were nothing but supportive. The shame and the guilt and the fear and the denial that I felt and I was processing for years was internalized. It didn't come from them. And I know that there's people out there still today, unfortunately, who don't have that kind of support from the people that are close to them. So this is why a phrase like this is so important. If we could just live in a world where we can love people more than we don't understand them, then that ripple effect is huge. And I feel that in general terms as well with my family. I know that, and other people, but I'll give the example of my family. Like, I know that some of the choices I've made and the things I choose to do with my life, they don't understand them, but they have always supported me and loved me in everything that I have done, So to take this a bit further, if you're listening to this show and you've got people in your life, whether it's your kids, or friends or family members or colleagues, and especially kids, because I work with kids and teens. And I want to keep this specific in the context that's relevant today, actually. That if they are, let's say, if you think they're queer in some way, LGBTQ in some way, and you are feeling really out of your depth and you're feeling overwhelmed because that's not been your experience and you don't know what they need and you don't know how to talk to them, then perhaps this phrase is going to help you. Love someone more than you don't understand them. So maybe you have a son that likes to dress in a way that you just don't understand. And that's okay. If that's what they need to do, support them to embrace that. If you've got a kid who's got really obscure interests taking this wider in general terms, really obscure interests that you just can't get your head around, and you know that those interests make them happy, support them to be able to do that, because that's them doing their best to try and shine and work out who they are. Now, I could talk more. We don't actually have a show after mine, so if I run over by a couple of minutes, Django's told me that's okay. I feel like there's a lot to say, and I feel like that this is a part one, and I'd be really interested to know your experience of listening to this show and what parts you would have liked me to go into more depth on, actually. I'm going to play a song now, and then we're going to come back for 2 or 3 more minutes. And I have a feeling we're going to run over for a couple of minutes if you're listening live. And I'm glad that I've got that flexibility. I could not do this show without playing what I know a lot of people consider one of the all-time best gay anthems. And this song, and for some reason I felt I needed to look out the year that this song came out. It came out the year I was born, 1983, and it is none other than I Am What I Am by Gloria Gaynor. And this song is just so rousing, and that's my alarm again, so rousing. And I want you to I'm going to read out the first 4 lines so that we can really take them in, because they are epic. It takes a lifetime to become the best we can be. We have not the time or the right to judge each other. It's one life, and there's no return and no deposit. One life. So make sure you like what's in your closet. Django, if you could pop on I Am What I Am by Gloria Gaynor.
Kinda sound radio. We're tuning in the change.
Hello, and I wanted to pop back on here just to close off the show, this first live show that I've done. I'm delighted to have found the space, the time, and the nerve to do this, and I really hope that you enjoyed I Am What I Am by Gloria Gaynor. I was just commenting to Django that was actually a version of the song that I don't know. And the one that I know myself has got even more sparkle and bangles than the one we listened to. And I think some of the words were even different. And that's okay. It was very lovely to listen to. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in today. And I really hope that this show has served you, has given you food for thought, has helped you feel inspired and seen. And I really hope it's been thought-provoking. I felt so called to do this show today, and it feels like on both a professional and a personal level, like there's a shift going on inside me. And I do realize until this point today in doing this show and all the lead up to it, that I have been holding myself back, and I don't want to do that. So I just won't. So thank you for being part of this adventure today. And as I always like to close my shows, is with a gratitude practice. So I've got my hands on my heart already, actually. The invitation is you can do this with me. Put your hands on your heart and just feel that connection. You don't need to close your eyes. We can be mindfully aware when we've got our eyes open as well. And if it feels good, please do close your eyes. I'm going to keep mine open. And I want to share 2 or 3 things that I'm grateful for. And as I always say, no matter how rubbish a day we're having, consciously taking a moment to name 2 or 3 things that we're grateful for can shift our energy significantly. Such a wonderful high vibration gratitude. So what am I grateful for? I'm really grateful for my voice and my story, because everyone's voice and everyone's story is equally important. And I feel really grateful to to have this platform to be able to have this conversation today. I feel grateful to several individuals, you know who you are, who you've supported me to get to this point today. And mostly I'm grateful to that lost queer kid inside of me that wouldn't give up and needed to thrive. And I'm glad she had such a fighting spirit despite a difficult start. Oh, I'm feeling a lot of emotion. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for being on this adventure. And I will be on here again in 2 weeks' time. I am interviewing Lorraine Murray, who also has her own show on this podcast. Do check that out, Fine Parenting. She's usually the one who does the interviewing, and this time I get to interview her. So that's going to be a fascinating interview, and I'm really looking forward to it. Until then, take care. Please reach out, especially if you've got questions and you feel that you need further support based on what we've talked about today. I'm really open to having a conversation with you. Okay, until next time, take care and goodbye.